WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's May Day in Dakar, 1 o'clock in Abuja. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio Broadcasting on 94.9 FM and online at wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Ghana's President John Mahama wraps up his Sahel tour in Burkina Faso with a pledge to jointly fight terrorism and foster regional integration.
Our countries trade amongst each other. Our people travel freely amongst each other. And so we had the opportunity to discuss how we can make our economic relations even stronger. And most importantly, we discussed the fight against terrorism because we all occupy the same sub-region.
Ogoni land in Nigeria's Niger Delta drags shell to a UK court over continuous contamination of water sources and biodiversity. The creation of a legal incubator gets underway in the Gambia, and $620 million funding deficit may hamper assistance to vulnerable groups in Nigeria and the Sahel by April, WFP says.
Well, the problem is related to the funding constraints. As we are talking, the World Food Program is in need of more than $620 million to continue our operations across the Sahel, especially in Central Sahel and in.
Details of these stories and more are coming up shortly.
Here is Augustine Coley with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and welcome to our listeners within the sub-region and beyond. Newslink begins in the Sahel region as the AEM member countries continue to host President John Dramani Mahama of Ghana. President Mahama, who embarked on a mediation tour of the region first to Bamako, wraps up his visit in Ouagadougou today after a stopover on Sunday in Niamey, the Nigerian capital. The Ghanaian leader hopes to revitalize relations between Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and ECOWAS through its diplomatic efforts, Echiatisu reports.
President Mahama has in the last 48 hours interfaced with officials of the Malian and Nigerian transitional governments aiming to foster regional cooperation between them and the regional powerhouse ECOWAS. In Bamako and Niamey, Mahama stressed the importance of what he called constructive cooperation to address common challenges such as terrorism, human and drug trafficking, and arms smuggling, among others.
And we also took the opportunity to discuss issues of bilateral cooperation and trade and economic cooperation between our two countries. We know that for a very long time, our countries trade amongst each other. Our people travel freely amongst each other. And so we had the opportunity to discuss how we can make our economic relations even stronger. And most importantly, we discussed how Ghana can be of help in terms of cooperating with AES in terms of the fight against terrorism, because we all occupy the same sub-region, and terrorism in one country is a threat to all of us.
In response, leader of the CNSP, General Abdurrahman Chiani, pledged his commitment to promote regional trade and commerce, peace and stability. President Mahama's visit to the Sahel comes shortly after the AES countries at a ministerial meeting held in Bamako presented the confederal flag and took stock of progress made in the areas of defense, security and diplomacy. Mahama, according to official sources, will wrap up his tour in Burkina Faso on Monday. Experts believe his engagement with authorities in Ouagadougou holds major significance, citing reports of growing security threats on the border between Ghana and Burkina Faso. Recall that on March 5, Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara hosted John Mahama to discuss similar concerns about reintegrating the AES countries back to ECOWAS and the farm gate price of cocoa beans for farmers in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, two of the world's largest producers of the crop.
Echiatisu fight that report. Crossing over to Guinea, rights defenders and activists are still demanding the whereabouts of Fonike Mengi and Mamadou Biloba, who went missing exactly 8 months on Sunday. The two activists of the National Front for the Defense of the Constitution, FNDC, were adopted on July 9, 2024. Since then, their families and friends have had no news of them. Guinean Prime Minister Amadou Riba recently announced that the investigation into their disappearance is continuing. However, the Guinean Organization for the Defense of Human Rights and the Citizens is demanding greater clarity about the facts. Alancine Sarr is the organization's communication officer.
Il n'y a aucune information sur la suite de la procédure.
There has been no information on the next steps in the procedure, despite the outrage it caused, and indeed even after the outrage when the judicial inquiry was opened. And so, it has been more than 8 months now, and there has been no follow-up. And what's even more worrying is that following Faneki Mengi and Biloba, there have been other similar cases. I am referring in particular to the case of the journalist Marwan Kamara, who has also disappeared and has not been heard from since. There is the case of Mr. Sadoni Maga, and even more recently, there is the case of Abdul Sako, who was also brought up and tortured. So far, neither the Ministry of Human Rights, which is also the Ministry of Justice, nor the Conakry Public Prosecutor's Office have denied saying anything about the situation. I think that the Prime Minister and the government spokesman have all made statements, but these statements are far from reassuring in. So far, as generally speaking, in practice, it is the Ministry of Justice that usually takes up the lead in these cases, but also the Conakry Public Prosecutor's Office, which usually informs the public through a press release. I think they are engaged in a political communication that does not say its name. There is no real desire to enlighten public opinion. We would have liked the President to have gone beyond the rules he has expressed about the practice, which he has emphasized is not a credit to the Guinean state, and to have told us today what he has done. No one has been called to testify in this case. This means that there is no investigation. This is a kind of denial of justice.
Aksen Insal is the communications officer of the Guinean Organization for the Defense of Human Rights and Citizens. The National Assembly of the Gambia has rescheduled the second reading of the Promulgation Bill 2024 to the second ordinary session in June 2025. This comes after the Assembly Business Committee of the legislature received a request from the Attorney General and Minister of Justice for the rescheduling. The bill was originally scheduled for a second reading and voting on Thursday, March 27 this year. Our Banjul correspondent Sankule Janko tells us more.
The Gambia's National Assembly rescheduled the second reading of the 2024 draft constitution after a request for an extension was made by the Attorney General and Justice Minister, Dauda Ejalo. Although no further details were provided, the delay is believed to provide additional time for thorough consultations and refinement of the document, which has sparked a nationwide debate and generated concerns from the diaspora. Nonetheless, a National Assembly member has expressed support for the 2024 draft constitution, which he says marks a significant step towards consolidating democracy and strengthening the rule of law. Abdoulaye Sise represents All Yundum constituency.
If you look at the 2024 draft, one of the clauses that is very pertinent is the issue of term limit and the 50+1. I think the 50+1 is something that we need to celebrate as a country in our democracy, to have 50+1 vote. That is something that we need to celebrate. And this is one of the clauses that has inspired me or motivated me to support the 2024 draft. Yes, the 2024 draft might not be perfect, just like the 2020 draft, but we can still improve it as members of parliament.
On the other hand, National Assembly member for Kiang West, Lamin Sise, laments the lack of consultations.
For a small section of the population to go sit and craft a law that favors them and bring it to the parliament for representatives of the people to approve that for them is very illegal, and I will not be part of the members who would pass that type of a law for the government.
Recently, opposition leader lawyer Usainu Dabo insisted that his party, United Democratic Party, which formed the second majority in parliament, will not endorse the 2024 draft document unless it is amended. Many fear the new draft constitution could suffer a similar fate, much like the 2020 draft, which was rejected at the second reading scrutiny stage in 2020.
Sankle Janko fight that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Let's remain in the Gambia because the country is set to have its first legal incubator as a U.S. Anthony Fred Rooney partners with a women's advocacy NGO known as Women in Liberation and Leadership WILL for this laudable project. The planned legal incubator, the first of its kind in Africa, will enable WILL and its partners to provide much needed education on legal rights to communities across the country. The funder of WILL, Dr. Fatou Balde, has described her partnership with the U.S. Anthony as a welcome development. Abdullahi Hassan reports.
Speaking at a meeting in Banjul on Saturday, Fred Rooney, a U.S. attorney dubbed the father of legal incubators by the American Bar Journal for his work worldwide, introduced the concept of legal incubators to the gathering. Rooney explained that legal incubators provide much-needed training to young lawyers on how to practice in the courtroom and run a successful law business by providing pro bono or low-cost legal services to people who can't afford them. For Dr. Fatou Balde, who was recently named a Time Magazine Woman of the Year 2025 for advocacy for women's health and reproductive rights, the planned legal incubator will enable her organization to provide education on legal rights to communities across the country. She said there is a high incidence of gender-based violence in all communities across the Gambia, and WILL is ready to help empower young lawyers to contribute through the legal incubator program. Participants, including female lawyers, expressed confidence in providing legal services because of the prevalence of gender-based violence, crime, and teenage delinquency in Gambian communities. However, strict compliance will also be made with requirements promulgated by the General Legal Council, which governs lawyers by regulating admission to the practice, professional conduct, and legal education within the Gambia. The Faculty of Law at the University of the Gambia has been identified as a potential home for the legal incubator. The U.S. Attorney, Fred Rooney, Dr. Fatou Balde, and their team members are scheduled to meet and brief other vital stakeholders on the legal incubator in the coming days.
Abdullahi Hassan with that report. The legal battle between a Nigerian monarch from the South-South region and oil giant Shell has intensified. King Godwin Baby Okpabi accused the company of decade-long pollution of the Ogoniland in the Niger Delta during a hearing of nearly 4 weeks at a UK court that closed on Friday. Okpabi, ruler of the Ogali community, presented samples of the contaminated water from his homeland as evidence, describing the environmental damage as a health crisis. From Abuja, Usma Umar reports.
This legal battle has been on for more than 10 years. King Godwin Bebe Okpabi of Ogale Kingdom in the Niger Delta has been in and out of court with the oil giant from Nigeria all the way to the United Kingdom. Presenting his case before Justice Juliet May, the monarch claims that Shell's operations have poisoned drinking water, destroyed livelihoods, and led to rising cases of cancer and other illnesses.
Right now, they are taking us from courthouses to courthouses, spending billions of pounds just to stay away from being responsible for the atrocities that they have cost us. That's sad. So I'm appealing to the conscience of the owners of Royal Dutch Shell. That money is blood money.
A member of his legal team in the UK also believes it's about time Shell is compelled to do right by the people of Ogoniland.
They've experienced decades of accumulated contamination of their land. These people are determined to have justice. They're determined that Shell should be held accountable, that they should clean up their pollution, and that they should receive compensation.
Shell, however, argues it cannot be held responsible for the pollution, blaming oil theft and illegal refining as the primary causes. The British multinational oil and gas company maintains that it collaborates with the Nigerian government to mitigate spills and clean up affected areas. The case, brought by the Ogale and Bille communities in the Niger Delta region, challenges Shell's liability under Nigerian law and the African Charter. While a full trial is expected in late 2026, the case could set a historic legal precedent for holding a UK multinational accountable for human rights violations. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. Ghana's President John Mahama wraps up his Sahel tour in Burkina Faso with a pledge to jointly fight terrorism and to foster regional integration. Ogoniland in Nigeria's Niger Delta drags shelled to a UK court over continuous contamination of water sources and biodiversity. Still ahead, 620 million funding deficit may hamper assistance to vulnerable groups in Nigeria and the Sahel by April, WFP says. We also have a press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Many thanks for staying with us. We are streaming live on YouTube at WADR News and on Facebook, WADR English Service. The World Food Programme, WFP, could suspend its humanitarian assistance to the Sahel and Nigeria in April this year. The UN organization is facing serious funding problems. The WFP needs $620 million or more than 300 billion CFA francs to help several million people in humanitarian need. Jaunsede Majanga is WFP's communication manager for West and Central Africa Bureau in Dakar.
Well, the problem is related to the funding constraints. As we are talking, the World Food Programme is in need of more than $620 million to continue our operations across the Sahel, especially in Central Sahel and in If we don't get that money, then we will be forced. This is not a decision we are taking. We will be forced. The World Food Programme will have no option but to suspend assistance to 2 million people in Niger, in Mali, in Mauritania, and in Nigeria. And this is due mainly to the fact that we have no funding right now to ensure this operation can continue. The impending cuts in Central Sahel in Nigeria are not at all related to the U.S. situation. This region has always been chronically underfunded. Last year, for instance, during the lean season, funding constraints have already obliged WFP to prioritize assistance to 7 million people when we initially planned to reach at least 11 million people with food assistance. And recently, in Mali, for instance, our operations, especially the school meals, were temporarily suspended, affecting more than 112,000 people in 400 schools in Mali. So the situation is due to the chronic funding shortfalls that the World Food Programme is facing in the region.
Jaunsede Majanga is WFP's communication manager for West and Central Africa Bureau here in Dakar.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Let's travel back to the Nigerian capital, Abuja, and rejoin Usma Umar for the newspaper review.
We begin today with the Daily Trust newspaper, and it's leading with this political story. 2027, Tinubu's re-election campaign kicks off in North with two riders. El Rufai meets Aregbesola Bakare in Lagos, Atiku in Abuja, and a couple of other stories are below the masthead of the Daily Trust. Community leaders, bandits work out peace deal in Katsina local governments. And the next paper is The Matrix. The Matrix is leading with this story. Natasha, sexual harassment brouhaha. Akpabio Saraki fight dirty. Akpabio is the president of the Senate under the eye of the needle after being accused by a fellow senator, Natasha Akpoti, of sexual harassment. And Bukola Saraki is a former president of Nigerian Senate. A raft of other stories on the front page of the Matrix. Federal government boosts transportation in Northeast, set to deploy 10,000 electric vehicles. NAFTA, that is National Agency for Food, Drug Administration and Control, continues onslaught against substandard drugs, destroys 100 billion naira fake medicines. Detail is on page 9 of the Matrix. And quickly, the Leadership newspaper is leading with this story. Looming food insecurity. Address farmers' challenges now, experts tell federal government. With a rider, decry poor execution of emergency declaration of food security. warn of delayed delivery of farm inputs, absence of accessible loans, detrimental to set goals. This is according to stakeholders. And finally, our last paper for the day is Nigerian Tribune. Nigerian Tribune has a raft of stories here. Catholic bishop decry worsening security, economic hardship. 15 killed in Benue communities. Importers to pay more as shipping companies increase charges. Monetary recoveries funding Nigeria's education loan. This is according to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. And that's the much we have for you on this edition of Press Review as I hand you back to the studios.
Usman Umar there with the Press Review.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is a guest.
This segment of Newslink takes us to the Sahel region as the AES member countries continue to host President John Dramani Mahama of Ghana. President Mahama, who embarked on a mediation tour of the region first to Bamako, wraps up his visit in Ouagadougou today after a stopover on Sunday in Niamey, the Nigerian capital. The Ghanaian leader hopes to revitalize relations between Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and ECOWAS through his diplomatic efforts. Our guest is Michael Nkitia, an international relations expert who speaks about the possibility of Mahama's influence to bring back the AES member countries to the regional bloc, ECOWAS.
Anyone who has followed keenly President John Dramani Mahama since his return to power earlier this year, during his inaugural address, he stated categorically that ECOWAS should be stronger together, and he has shared this ambition and plan of trying to reintegrate the 3 member states of ECOWAS who unfortunately decided to part ways with their sub-regional body. And the visit to these 3 countries is just a follow-up, an actionable plan towards his collective vision of bringing these countries back to ECOWAS. Of course, ECOWAS stands to benefit should Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso return to the mother union. The same applies to Ghana.
Now, sir, will President Mahama succeed to get these 3 countries back to the regional bloc ECOWAS, given the fact that they've begun working collaboratively and signing their own agreements as alliance of Sahel states?
Well, the first question we have to ask ourselves is whether President Mahama has the approval of the other member states, the remaining 12 member states of ECOWAS, whether he has the approval to lead these negotiation efforts or peace-building efforts to bring these countries back. If he has the approval of the other 11 members, that would be so welcoming, because for President Mahama to succeed in bringing these 3 countries back to the ECOWAS bloc, the other 11 member states other than Ghana may have to agree to such an arrangement, and without their tacit support and approval, it will be an exercise in futility. However, if he has the support of the other 11 member states of ECOWAS, then I believe that he can package and brand his message to these 3 countries, breakaway countries, to be able to bring them back, because despite their attempts to constitute some form of alliance on their own, regardless of all that they are trying to achieve, they know that realistically and practically, they will be much more better off in an association with the larger ECOWAS bloc than them trying to pursue this tripartite Sahelian alliance. And I believe that if President Mahama has the support of all the member states of ECOWAS to lead these negotiation efforts to bring them back, he has a very, very high chance of succeeding in bringing them back.
Being that ECOWAS has now officially requested President Mahama to intervene into the ECOWAS and Sahelan countries' crisis, could it be that President Mahama is using his tour to cement relationship between Ghana and these 3 countries towards regional trade and the fight against terrorists?
It serves the interest of Ghana if we continue to trade with these 3 states. In Ghana here, we depend a lot on imports from Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso relies so much on the ports of Ghana for the importation of almost everything. The same can be said of Mali and Niger. They export a lot of the agricultural produce into Ghana. Likewise, Ghana also may have other things that we also export to these three countries. But if you look at a net summation of it, the three countries stand to lose a lot of financial gains if they decide to cease trade arrangements with Ghana entirely. And I believe that President Mahama may not be wrong to also use this trip to improve the bilateral trade and even political relations between Ghana and all these individual countries, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. And that is also a step in the right direction.
Michael Nkitia is an international relations expert. Up next is Sankle Janko with the latest in the world of sports.
Hello there, warm welcome and thank you for joining us. Gabon's hopes of progressing to the next round of the African Championship qualifiers were dazed as they suffered a penalty shootout defeat to Gambia after a goalless draw in Libreville on Saturday. Despite dominating the second leg match of the second qualification stage and creating numerous goal-scoring chances, the Panthers failed to find the net, ultimately paying the price in the shootout. The decisive moment came in the 78th minute when Gabon was awarded a penalty, but Samson Bingui failed to convert, leaving the Scorpions with a lifeline. With the match still deadlocked at 0-0 after regulation time, the contest went to a penalty shootout where Gambia kept their composure to secure victory and advance to the next round. The Scorpions converted all their attempts while Gabon's Nasta Oyono missed his shot, sending his effort wide and sealing his team's elimination. Elsewhere, South Africa secured their place in the next round of the 2024 African Nations Championship CHAN qualifiers with a commanding 3-1 victory over Egypt in Cairo, sealing a 4-2 aggregate win on Sunday night. Goals from Neo Maema, Yandisam Folosi and Luthuli ensured a comfortable victory for the visitors. Meanwhile, Malawi advanced thanks to their 2-0 home win over Comoros to seal a 4-0 aggregate victory. The last round of the qualifiers will be played in May, with the first leg taking place between May 2 to 4, while the return leg fixtures are scheduled for May 10 and 11. The final tournament will be played in Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania in August 2025. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
We've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Sheikh Njai for the technical support. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook, WADR English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is our flagship health program, Well Buddy. At 1 p.m., Mustafa Jakite will be here with the news in French, which is Info Chez Vous. I am Augustine Cully. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0.